or their transponder signal, or were flying off course, usually within 10 minutes of any sign of a problem. Contrary to what some people think, presidential approval wasn't needed to intercept or even shoot down an aircraft. Then on June 1, 2001, the existing hijacking response procedures were changed to require approval by the Secretary of Defense before responding to a situation with lethal force. And when the call came into the Pentagon on 9/11, nobody answered the phone. The stand-down order that Charles Lewis heard about was confirmed by none other than Norman Mineta, Transportation Secretary at the time. According to the 9/11 Commission, Cheney didn't arrive underground at the PEOC, Presidential Emergency Operations Center, until almost 10 a.m. Mineta, however, said the vice president was already down there when he arrived at about 9:20 a.m. Richard Clark and Cheney's photographer indicated the same thing. That was before the Pentagon had been hit, and Mineta recalled a young man coming into the PEOC 3 times to tell Cheney how far out the plane was from Washington. After the 3rd report, according to Mineta, the young fellow asked, "Do the orders still stand?" And Cheney responded, "Of course the orders still stand. Have you heard anything to the contrary?" The 9/11 Commission chose to ignore Mineta's testimony and went so far as to remove it from the video archive. Instead, they had Cheney ordering almost 45 minutes later than Mineta said the inbound aircraft be shot down. Except by then, all 4 planes had already gone down. That was cover-up number 1 by the 9/11 Commission. Now let's look at whether it was actually those 2 planes that were responsible for the falling towers. I was amazed watching the 2007 version of the documentary Loose Change, which I urge everyone to see, at the many firefighters and other eyewitnesses who talked about a whole series of explosions before and during the collapse of the buildings. All of this was reported on the news at the time. Before the South Tower collapsed, video footage clearly shows sizable amounts of white smoke starting to pour out of the base. There was described a giant rolling ball of flame that came up from street level, an elevator that exploded on the 65th floor as someone stood beside it, a woman on the 49th floor seeing people with burns and broken arms in the stairwells. For every window in the lobby to be exploding, it wasn't from the jet fuel, no way, according to one of the witnesses, and a whole lot more that did not jive with any plane striking the building. Barry Jennings, the city's emergency coordinator, was at the scene before and after the building collapses. Jennings puts it out there plainly. "I know what I heard. I heard explosions." For my TV show, I interviewed a witness named William Rodriguez, a janitor who happened to have a master key and rescued many people and got honored at the White House as a national hero. He says that shortly before American Airlines Flight 11 struck the North Tower at 8:46 a.m., an explosion simultaneously rocked the building so hard it pushed us up. Rodriguez later testified behind closed doors to the 9/11 Commission, but his name was never mentioned in the report. Rodriguez also gave the Commission and the FBI a list of 14 people who had been with him, but not a single one was ever contacted. He produced his boss for us, who looked me right in the eye and in essence told me the same story. What's happened to Rodriguez today? He's on the no-fly list. A guy who went back in to save people with no regard for his own life. When he goes somewhere, he's pulled out of the line, interrogated, harassed. All because, I guess, he didn't give the proper testimony they wanted. Some people have argued that the Twin Towers went down within a half hour of one another because of the way they were constructed. Well, those 425,000 cubic yards of concrete and 200,000 tons of steel were designed to hold up against a Boeing 707, the largest plane built at the time the towers were completed in 1973. Analysis had shown that a 707 traveling at 600 miles an hour, and those had 4 engines, would not cause major damage. The twin-engine Boeing 757s that hit on 9/11 were going 440 and 550 miles an hour. Still, we are told that a molten, highly intense fuel mixture from the planes brought down these 2 steel-framed skyscrapers. Keep in mind that no other such skyscraper in history had ever been known to collapse completely due to fire damage. So could it actually have been the result of a controlled demolition from inside the buildings? I don't claim expertise about this, but I did work 4 years as part of the Navy's underwater demolition teams, where we were trained to blow things to hell and high water. And my staff talked at some length with a prominent physicist, Stephen E. Jones, who says that a gravity-driven collapse without demolition charges defies the laws of physics. These buildings fell at nearly the rate of free fall, straight down into their own footprint in approximately 10 seconds. An object dropped from the roof of the 110-story tall towers would reach the ground in about 9.2 seconds. Then there's the fact that steel beams that weighed as much as 200,000 pounds got tossed laterally as far as 500 feet. The National Institute of Standards and Technology, NISI, started its investigation on August 21, 2002. When their 10,000-page long report came out 3 years later, the spokesman said there was no evidence to suggest a controlled demolition. But Stephen E. Jones also says that molten metal found underground weeks later is proof that jet fuel couldn't have been all that was responsible. I visited the site about 3 weeks after 9/11 with Governor Pataki and my wife, Terry. It didn't mean anything to me at the time, but they had to suspend digging that day because they were running into heat pockets of huge temperatures. These fires kept burning for more than 3 months, the longest burning structure blaze ever. And this was all due to jet fuel? We're talking molten metal, more than 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Probably the most conclusive evidence about a controlled demolition is a research paper, 2 years, 9 authors, published in the peer-reviewed Open Chemical Physics Journal in April 2009. In studying dust samples from the site, these scientists found chips of nanothermite, which is a high-tech, incendiary explosive. Here's what the paper's lead author, Dr. Niels Harrit of the University of Copenhagen's Chemistry Department, had to say about the explosive that he's convinced brought down the Twin Towers and the nearby Building 7. Thermite itself dates back to 1893. It is a mixture of aluminum and rust powder, which react to create intense heat. The reaction produces iron, heated to 2,500 degrees centigrade. This can be used to do welding. It can also be used to melt other iron. So in nanothermite, this powder from 1893 is reduced to tiny particles perfectly mixed. When these react, the intense heat develops much more quickly. Nanothermite can be mixed with additives to give off intense heat or serve as a very effective explosive. It contains more energy than dynamite and can be used as rocket fuel. Richard Gage is one of hundreds of credentialed architects and structural engineers who have put their careers on the line to point out the detailed anomalies and many implications of controlled demolition in the building collapses. As he puts it bluntly, once you get to the science, it's indisputable. So what happened to the steel debris from the World Trade Center that might have backed this up? Well, for the most part, it was shipped overseas. The removal by 4 companies contracted by the city was carefully controlled and monitored. The building assessment performance team wasn't allowed to take samples. One firefighter I spoke with who got dug out of the rubble on 9/11 said, "The one thing that always troubled me is, why were they in such a hurry to remove all the evidence? Why did they take away everything from the site as fast and expediently as possible. I tried to talk to someone from the 9/11 Commission, but got turned down multiple times. They simply said, "We stand